Okay, it looks like we are live. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Today I have Yoel Israel, founder of Wadi Digital and LinkedIn expert. Anybody who knows Yoel knows that he knows how to strike up a conversation with literally anybody.
Or anything. I could talk to a chair. Like.
Personally, I've seen you on live sessions before where you just took a family outing to like a winery and started talking to the owner and the process and all that. You've been to, you sometimes pick up some very random people and have very interesting conversations with them. And today's day and age, not today, always. Conversation is what moved civilization forward. The countries that had communications were the ones that evolved into the US and Europe and kind of developed countries. And the ones without communications are the ones that stayed behind and are still in the Stone Age, right? So conversation is incredibly important. And it's something, it's a lost art now. Kids today are on Facebook and social media typing away, but they don't actually have conversations and talk to people, which is a shame. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And then we'll get a little bit into, how to have a conversation, how to start one with people, how to keep it interesting.
Sweet. I'm Yoel Israel. I think you kind of introduced me, founder and CEO, even though I hate that title, of Wadi Digital. And I'm a LinkedIn legend, as they say. I don't know who they is, but I've heard it said here and there. I do love LinkedIn. It's my obsession. And the reason why I love it is because it's the most authentic way, in my opinion, to communicate with people online. And that's kind of that's pretty the short straight of it. So do you want to jump in? I'll let you lead.
So let's let's start at the beginning. You talk to a lot of people. Why, let's start with the why. Why is it that you feel, why is it that you start talking to random people, to whether it's at a conference or at a restaurant or on the street? Why? How do you think that helps you in your personal or business life?
Well, that's two very different questions. I'll start with why I speak to people, and then I'll address how we'll probably get into that even more later. I am a naturally curious person. I love learning how things work. I like seeing things, like I just kind of taking things apart a little bit, try to understand people, try to understand ideas, try to understand thoughts. I do like to read a lot about ideas or listen about ideas and things, and then I kind of try to test them in public when I speak to people. I kind of try to hear people out. I am a big believer that you only learn when you're listening, right? We all want to talk, we all want to share, we all want to influence, and obviously one of the ways to do that is to speak or be vocal, but it's kind of backwards in the sense. I mean, in order for you to be able to influence someone else, you need to be open to hearing them. And if they don't feel that you're willing to be open to hearing them, then they're not going to be open for when you have something to say to them. But it really comes from a lot of just my sheer curiosity. Like, why do you think X, Y, and Z? Well, what about this and that? Or I'm really interested. You know what I mean? So in everything, in what people are like, what people wear, everything. So I would say to you, it's like, hey, I noticed you got a haircut, Dave. It looks good. Is it because the 9 days that you're not getting a haircut right now? It's like a mourning period during that started last night. The Jewish calendar. Is that why? So everything's a conversation starter. Everything can be curious. Anything you make an assumption on, don't make an assumption. I'm just I want to know what's the reason, and I'll ask straightforward. And it's authentic, and that authenticity comes through. And usually that's a great way to start a conversation.
Right. I agree with you that the authenticity is a big part of what drives the conversation. Again, you have to. Part of it is authenticity. Part of it is just being comfortable with asking. A lot of people are just I really want to ask him about that, but I'd be uncomfortable raising it, or I'd feel like it might.
People are a little too insecure. It's good to be self-conscious. It's not good to be insecure, in my opinion, generally speaking, at least when it comes to conversations. So, I like to focus. I try not to think and worry about it. I do know sometimes you're like, how is it going to come off? I know sometimes you might flirt with the line, you might cross the line, you know what I mean? But that might happen. But then you need to have intuition, empathy, and have your fingers on the pulse. If you might have said something, or if you're not worried how it came out like you intended it to, you have to just be able to roll it back and just say, I didn't mean it to come out like that, or something. You know, people are all adults, especially in private conversations. So I mean, if you're scared, if you're wondering whether you should say something or you should ask something, or you're curious about something, just say it, just blurt it. Don't withhold. Don't worry about how it's going to be perceived. Don't think about PC or anything. And just like be honest. I mean, as long as you're authentic, you're caring, you're loving, and you're genuine in your curiosity, then I think people will see your authenticity. And you know, you can always walk back what you say anyway. So I think a lot of people are just a little too scared to say what they're thinking.
Well, I think that's part of what, you know, where we are today. That, you know, when I'm having a conversation with you and I say something, it's not as easy to roll back sometimes. But if you are,
give an example.
I'm saying, if whatever it is, if I'm having a conversation with you and I say something I think, and then I realize I crossed the line, I already said it. It's out there. Versus on Facebook where I could say it and then, right, let me delete it and then retype it or change my mind. And people kind of got used to that safety buffer of being able to revise and reread and think it over before they post.
I disagree, man. I think in person and in private, you can say things and then it's like, it's human, and then you can always redo it. I think once it's on the internet, there's screenshots and there are things, and it can't. You should. I actually think the opposite. I think in person, when people can hear your tone of voice, sarcasm is you can tell when you could tell when someone's being sarcastic or joking, or they're saying something, they're also being self-mocking. You know what I mean? There's more the context in audio, and not to mention body language, right? The advantage of video, you know, facial expressions that you're able to get when you want to communicate and you want to be curious with someone. So that's something that you get that you don't get online. You might be able to hit edit, you might be able to hit delete, but anything that's on the internet can never be taken away, unfortunately.
Right. I mean in the terms of before it even comes out, you could type something, read it over, think through it before you hit send or before you hit enter, versus when you're just saying it.
Yeah, I should probably do that more, but
some people do and some people don't.
I mean, I can't tell you how often I post and then people tell me, yo, you like totally misspelled. There's like 2 random words in the middle of your sentence that make no sense. And I'm like, damn it, the post is getting traction and I don't want to screw with the algorithm. You know what I mean? Do I fix it?
Yeah, I hear that.
But I like the authenticity of not editing. I mean, I think Twitter's a shit show, but I like that you can't edit tweets. I think Twitter actually, they tweeted like a week or 2 ago, they'll say, we'll give you an edit button when everyone wears a mask. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Like, you know, kind of like, you know, it's never going to happen, either of them. You're not going to have everyone wear a mask. We're never giving you an edit button. There is something authentic about about just blurting out what you not being able to, you know what I mean? Just kind of, there's something authentic in just saying what you think.
Right, I agree. And then and back to what you were saying before, it's, we were doing something, you know, I was writing something about this a couple months ago, and, you know, communication is only, I think, 8% the words that you say. It's 55% your body language.
100%.
And so that's
100%.
something that you can never get through in text. I had a situation a couple weeks ago where I commented on someone's post, and it was a completely sarcastic comment, but they read it as like meaningful
Literal
thing, and I could completely see how saying it seriously could be very offensive. And if you would have seen me roll my eyes saying it, you would have understood how the opposite it is.
Yeah. So right. So that's why you got to be careful. That's also why, I mean, like I have 3 right now. I'm on a laptop, right, and it's connected to 2 large 23-inch monitors, one to the right, one here, and one there. And I usually work on my larger monitors, and then this laptop's a little off to the left. But when I do video calls, like you mentioned, so I mean, I move over and I face left. And even though some of my main spreadsheets might be on the center, but it's important, that body language. And I always try to emphasize that with people, especially in our team when we all have multiple screens, is that you're not necessarily looking like, and by the way, I can drag your camera over to the main screen, but then you're still seeing the side of my face. You think I'm not talking to you, even though I'm looking at you in the video, but I'm not looking at the camera. So these small things are important in order for body language.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's, you know, again, I think that's part of why, you know, people are getting the Zoom overload, but still kind of sticking on Zoom, is because you do have that, you still have that, you know, face-to-face more than just a phone call with a voice, because you're missing, even with a voice to, you know, words in a voice is still only about 45% of the communication. You're still missing more than half the communication, which is the body language and facial expressions and all that.
Yeah, one of my favorite YouTube channels, they put out some like science videos, and they have like an international team, and they did a video on like how we work like remotely to get our videos up and the editing and all that. And it was just like one passing line about like working remotely and everything. But they had one line which I thought was so genius that like one of our rules are you can only call people on video and you must always answer on video.
Yeah.
For their team, but they're remote, right? This is pre-pandemic, by the way. But it's an interesting concept. Like if you ask me a question, you're not allowed to call me on the phone. You got to video call me.
Yeah.
There's something to that, and they're right. And it's an insane amount of added value when you can see someone.
Yeah, I agree. It adds a lot. So now let's get back a little bit back onto the main topic that we started off. One of the strength, something that you're an expert in is kind of walking into a random person and starting that conversation. Now, obviously in a business context, I know that I sell, marketing services. You are a tech company that needs marketing stuff. It's easy to start a conversation, but you do that with anyone. How do you even, right. Besides the, hi, what's your name? Or even that part, how do you approach a complete stranger and start the conversation with them?
I mean, well, you just find something you have in common or something about them that you want to know. So obviously, I mean, if you meet someone, let's say they have an article of clothing or jewelry or something that's interesting, you should comment and ask. I mean, if you have something nice to say, don't withhold. I mean, if someone's wearing a cool piece of jewelry or something unique, or you're curious where it's from, like, why are you keeping that curiosity to yourself? They're wearing it for a reason. It makes them feel good. They like it. They identify with it. They bought it for them to wear to express themselves in public. You know what I mean? Like, they want to be asked about, let's say, something that they're wearing or is related to their appearance. This goes for everyone, or anything else that's with you. Like, so you can say, this water bottle, in a sense, is a reflection, is an extension of me. You can ask me about this, or the decal on it, or what does it mean? Everything is a conversation starter. I can ask you about your shirt. Like I say, I can ask you about your hair. I can ask you about anything. I can ask you about your posture. I can ask about why there are two different colors of the wall behind you. Did you paint it to someone else? What do you think? And then you can, why green? Or if it is green, whatever it's like, anything can be part of a conversation. If you're curious and you start to see things from a angle of curiosity, an angle of how come, why, there's a reason for everything. Everything was a decision, right? Someone decided. Every policy, everything was a decision involved. So what was the decision? What were the motives behind it? And I think if you're interested, and also if you notice that everything involved a decision, right? Someone thinking, should I do this or that? Everything, it kind of makes every little thing that you see a little more interesting, because there were thoughts involved, or probably maybe cost calculation involved, efficiency, time, all kinds of things that go into anything and everything in our lives. So I think if you kind of focus on that, if you focus on this, I think that's really that's a really easy way to start a conversation, right?
Right. And so you start a conversation, ask someone about their shirt. I bought it at the Gap, or I bought it at Zara, or whatever. How do you actually find the common ground that's actually, interesting to you in terms of
I mean, you just think anything, any relation you have with that store. So you say, got it at Zara, and I goes, oh, my wife shops there, has never been there. Do they have a men's section? Do you think I would enjoy shopping there? I heard it's expensive. Is it true? Or is it better I ask you, or better ask my wife? Like, I don't know, you just work them into conversations, so you kind of, anything that anyone mentions, you just work it in. So like, have you been to Gap? Maybe have you worked at a different apparel? Maybe you could say, I worked at Old Navy or any other clothing store, and you could work that in. Or, oh, that's cool, I think that's similar, it looks like it. Or tell them a story from the Gap. Like, there, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that you can relate to. So as long as, if you have any reference point at all to the Gap or to Zara, you just work it into the conversation.
All right.
And even if you talk about yourself, like, let's say I give the example about Zara, but they bought their clothing at Zara. It's actually, the conversation is actually about them, and now they're interested, and now I'm turning it back and getting their opinion.
Right. So I mean, I know that the saying is kind of, keep asking the questions and get them talking, because that's, first of all, it makes you feel like, I'm the one that approached you. I want to make you feel special, make you open up and talk to me, and kind of keep the conversation going. But where do you feel you cross the line between, asking too much or getting too personal?
You got to feel it. Well, let's say if I like your shirt, I'll never say your shirt looks good on you. That's inappropriate. But I can say, okay, I like your shirt. or I like the color, or it's a cool shirt, or it's fancy. But I can't say I like how it looks on you. I think that's inappropriate. Even though you have no different intention, just one way of saying it, you have to think of how it's perceived. So you kind of need to know a little bit, need to have a little bit of intuition. And you only really find out where the closer you get to the line without touching the line, the better, the closer you can get with someone, right? So the more you can get like more intimate without being, that's weird, that's too much, the better it is. But you don't know where that line is until you've kind of walked up to a few times and like, okay, and you've walked in a safe way and walked back, and you kind of know where that is. So I think just having more conversations, trying to say things that might make you feel uncomfortable, seeing how the other person responds. I mean, you kind of get an idea what you can and can't say. And in general, like when I'm not sure, I just say whatever I feel, but I say it in a way that I make sure that it comes off respective, like in a way that I'm respecting them. And all this, or also like if you're really interested in this thing, you're not sure, you can say like, I don't know if this is like I don't mean this in any way that's inappropriate. However, I really, you know what I mean? I really like what, you know, it's really cool what you did, whatever, with something, you know, if you want to comment on something that you worry might, you know, you can tell them, I don't know if it is, I'm not trying to be, I want to like you can open up with that, and then people are receptive to it. I mean, just be honest. Like if you don't want, obviously, if you don't want to offend someone, or you don't want to cross the line, say, hey, I'm not trying to be offensive or cross the line. I'm just really interested. What do you think about this and this? Or, you know what I mean? Or tell me, you know, or ask them a personal question if you'd like.
Yeah. So do you have any examples of any times, you know, embarrassing situations where you did cross the line unknowingly?
I'm not going to share that.
Fair enough.
Like, some things can't be taken back. So it was, I'll think about the successes, but you know what I mean? It's like, what did they say? Like, was it Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky? I don't remember. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like you have to try to, if you try to avoid making a connection in fear of offending them, you're going to make zero connection with another person.
Right.
And not just, I'm saying that's bad for business. You're just not going to enjoy the relationship anyway. Like if you're not making a connection, if we don't have a reference point, if we don't have anything, share something in common, you know, something in the culture or something, if we don't have that, then conversations are going to be, their business calls, any calls, are just going to be boring. You're just not going to enjoy it. Think of how much more you can enjoy work if you actually get to speak with someone that's fun, that's interested in you, is interesting, that's curious, you know what I mean, and has some things in common, or, you know, interested in your thoughts and your ideas. It makes all the difference.
Right. I agree, 100%. It's you know, what turns your, you know, on the business side, it's what makes it, you know, like you said, interesting, makes it engaging, makes you, you know, aside from developing the relationship with the person, and which kind of is today a driver of business, having a relationship, and many times is the deciding factor between, you know, between whether they want to do business with you or with someone else. It also helps kind of push that relationship forward and building, you know, you take that client with you to the next place you go, or they bring you with them to the next place they go because of that relationship, not just down to business.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you want to get very strategic, yeah. But then that goes for any relationship building or any networking. I mean, if you have a positive relationship and you continue to maintain that positive relationship that has some kind of a connection point, then in general, when they're looking for services that you provide or services that are similar to yours, they'll reach out to you to work with you or to connect you with someone else. So, I mean, yeah, sure, no doubt, 100%. So, yeah.
Right.
And then, and in general, I think we're both in the B2B tech space. Just a side comment, I think actually having a personal relationship with the marketing strategy, things that are involved in communication. So I think marketing strategy and customer service is a big chunk of the actual results. Because longer marketing, longer sales cycle, you really need to have good strategy. You want to make sure that you're being heard, you know, and if you jump right into business, you're not being heard. I'm getting on the meeting so I can get off the meeting because I hate meetings. If you give off that vibe, then, you know, I mean, God help you.
Right. Of course. Yeah, it's all about kind of, I mean, aside from just I'm getting on the meeting to get it over with and get out, the more you're talking to the other person, the more you learn, discover new opportunities, discover new things in common, discover more conversation topics, things like that.
Exactly right.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of the active listening versus passive listening, and how you use that in a conversation, or how to you know, what the difference is and what to do with them.
When would you ever use passive listening?
Well, I'm saying you wouldn't really use it. Again, I guess actively listening versus kind of just passively hearing what the other person is saying and not really paying attention to it.
I mean, that's never intentional.
Right.
I may space out like anyone else. I would say, sorry, I missed that I spaced out. Can you go back? And people understand that, by the way. It's another connection point. Just being honest, everyone spaces out on calls, right? Like, so especially everyone's now on calls on the computer all day because of the pandemic. People like that. They've been like, sorry, spacing. Like, it's just another point, like, so I would just be honest. But I mean, passive listening is you're wasting your time because you could be actively listening. You're not. Right. You can't really do anything at the same time. Even if you passive listen, you have to basically ignore if you're going to try to multitask to pretend you're listening. I actually had a conversation with someone on our team recently, and I was saying there's a difference between patience and listening. Patience means you're giving someone the space to speak and say what they want, and you're waiting till they're finished. Listening is actually it's more of a it's the act of listening, hearing what they have to say, maybe saying it back to them, adding something on top, sharing a point of disagreement. I mean, right? People prefer that you disagree with them, in my opinion, because that means you are listening. Just like if you have a post, let's say I made a post, let's say about whatever, LinkedIn or ads or some strategy or something, and I much prefer someone comment that they disagree with me than they don't comment at all. That means they listened, as opposed to just scrolling through and giving a fake like and never reading a post. So I mean, reading, which is very common. So there's a difference between, tolerating someone to speak, being patient, or actually actively listening. So I think often people even enjoy someone going counter to them.
Right. So I think that's a good point. I mean, I guess people have been always taught, it's polite to wait until the other person's done speaking, listen through, hear the whole thing out. But I guess what you're saying and makes sense is sometimes it is, or I guess a lot of times it's more appropriate to actually jump in the middle, to cut them off with a question, or to cut them off with a comment on something say, and kind of show them that you are engaged in the conversation. You're not just listening and hearing everything they say and taking notes and writing it down and memorizing it, but it's not. You're not interacting with it.
Right. Exactly. It's right. It's all about interacting. Exactly.
Right.
What are your experiences with it? I mean, do you find it hard to actively listen, like call after call after call, or just or forget that? Let me rephrase. Where are your challenges in actively listening? When is it hard for you?
I think for me, a lot of times it's kind of it's the active the listening part is okay. Let me take in all this information. And then 15 minutes after the call, I'm like, wait, what did he mean when he said this and this? When he said he wants leads, did he mean he wants, quality leads, or did he want a volume of leads? Did he want this or that? Afterwards, after the conversation, when I start processing, then I start coming up with the questions that I need to get back to him and ask him A, B, C, D, E, F.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment from Yoel. I'm going to pull it up on screen. It's kind of long. Because her opening sentence is someone who doesn't converse easily. Oh wait, she mentions me.
I learned from Yoel that it can be learned. One of the biggest.
I think you can pull them up on the screen, can you, in StreamYard? There you go. Oh God, that's a huge comment. I think taking it out might be. Okay, maybe you want to just read it.
Yeah. So Yoel is.
Yoel works with me. She's on my team.
Yeah. She does the cyber accounts mostly, right?
Yeah, cybersecurity and funds marketer.
Learn from Yoel that it can be learned. Good to know. It's good to kind of point out that it's a learned skill and not like a trait that you're born with. One of the biggest keys really is focusing on the other, and the other key is just simply practicing by putting yourself out there. I agree. It's something that you have to put yourself out there. It's something that, like other things, you have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone in order to get there. What I was mentioning earlier is a lot of people were just growing up, were brought up being taught that, it's polite to listen and not interrupt. And like you said, it's actually better to interrupt and jump in the middle than to just sit back and wait till they're over. Mm-hmm. I've started trying to strike conversations with the service people I encounter on my errands. It's amazing how often offering a simple compliment totally changes interaction overall. Bonus.
Yeah, it's true.
Comment?
Okay.
I agree with that. It's something that, it's it's something that I've also been doing, even if it's something small with like, you walk into the mall and the guy that's checking your bags or you're the metal detector guy is like, hi, how you doing? Hot day today, something.
Yeah.
Just throw a
I always
comment.
thank them. I'm a person who always thank. I learned from my parents, my father in particular. He would teach me how. I don't mean this in an inappropriate way. How to flirt with the cashier. Usually, was much older woman. Everything like how to. That's the word he used. He's an immigrant. But like I was like how to flirt with the cashier, how to strike up conversation, how to ask, how to make them laugh, how to get them to enjoy their day a little bit more. And I mean, I think just as humans, we all have an obligation. You have an obligation for us to be in a good mood, like first and foremost. I think if you have a bad mood, just like Dennis Prager says, like a bad mood is like bad breath. It's not for you, or you've bad body odor. You put on deodorant for other people. You were to brush your bad mood away, like you would brush your bad breath away, right? You have a moral obligation to do that for the other people around you. So I'm a big believer in that, both the hygiene part and the and making people happy part. So I think like in general, like you should always find ways. You have to be in a good mood. You're obligated. Don't put your shitty mood off on me. I'm sorry. I'm not interested in it. There's too many. Life is too short, and there are way too many people to spend it with people that aren't in good spirits and don't elevate you and your mood and just being around them. So I mean, that's something that I've learned, and then my father taught me that. So I always make conversations when I'm standing around or when I'm waiting with people. You know what I mean? Or so if I would be waiting for a train or things like that. So you need to know when to speak to people, and also you need to know when not to speak to people, which is another thing, right? It's like that funny thing, like let's you get on an airplane, formerly an airplane. Remember those? And you'd sit next to someone and you might say, you would say hi, how you doing? And then you have to feel them out. If let's say you feel like speaking, do you want to converse with that person? More importantly, do they want to have a conversation with you? Maybe they're just like beat, maybe, after a layover, you don't know, and they just want to put on some headphones and go to bed or something. Or maybe they're just like, they same thing, but the exact opposite mood. They've been flying for a while on the layover, and they're sick of not speaking to anyone and having interaction with anyone that they've seen or known while running around. And they would surely love to communicate with someone. So you also need to have that intuition. You should be able to feel that out in your first sentence. So when you actually speak to someone, say, hey, how you doing today? Or thanks, you have to have like your ears perked up, and you kind of got to feel for it, how they're going to respond to you, and whether they're just appreciative of your warm gesture, or if they're interested in, or open, or even more interested in actually having a greater conversation. And this might seem silly, and it might seem there's no purpose to have a conversation with strangers, but what you're able to do is you're going to improve your skills by speaking to them. But your speaking skills and conversation skills in general. And there's no better way to practice them with a stranger that you're going to pass and you're never going to see again. So like if you're worried about being offended, like you're saying, or crossing a line or saying something that you're not sure will be received, practice it on strangers. It's the best way, because even if you do, you can just say sorry, walk away. They'll never think of you from the next day. You won't think of them again, and you would have gotten better. So really, everything's a testing ground in a sense. You know what I mean? And as a marketer, everything is a part of marketing. You should always test everything. So your conversations, your body posture, how you speak, hand movement, right? These are all things that you need to test and how they're received.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, one of the things I think is also intimidating to a lot of people is that person in the mood to talk to me? I might see something, I might see that they're wearing something cool, or I might, know that they work somewhere cool or something like that. And is this the right time to approach them? Is this, they're in the park with their kids. Do they want to talk to someone, or do they want to spend, do they want to spend the time with their kids, or do they just, want to let the kids run around and would appreciate an adult interaction while their kids are busy? Or any situation. You don't know if they're, like you said, if they're in a good mood or not.
Right.
And I've had a couple of interesting interactions, like you said, on the planes myself. Actually, one time while I was flying into Boston, and the person next to me started talking to me, and it was small talk, conversation back and forth. Asked me where I'm going. I told him, and oddly enough, that very random conversation. When I got off the plane, I get into the car and my cell phone and GPS don't work. It's my first time taking a car from Logan to Framingham. Never even heard of it beforehand. And I happened to actually find the way because he's like, oh yeah, you're gonna take this route and get off at this exit. And then I'm driving down the highway, and I'm like, oh yeah, that he said that. I got off, and that's how I found my way out.
Right.
So yeah, definitely, always helpful to have conversations and meet people.
Mm-hmm. Where there's a call, Paul Kian's Kian from LinkedIn pulled this comment. I love Kian. Kian's so cool.
Yeah, I just had a call with him. When he started the role, we talked about the meeting when he comes to Tel Aviv, and
actually when we got to the real world, and I said, no, I don't think so.
What? Do you think it will be a lasting negative effect on conversations when we get back out to the real world? Do you know some people have struggled? Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, hey, Kian, why don't you tell us about the stories of people that have struggled, but more than one off? But I don't think, I'm biased. I mean, first off, I'm speaking to people all day, not in person, but just like this over, the computer and through the camera all the time. So for me, it is natural, and it does come more natural to me. I have fine-tuned it, like Yoel said, it could be learned. I mean, so I've learned it. I sharpened this, the saw on this one a lot, and I continue to. But I think just people are so itching to speak to other people. When we first had the lockdowns, I'll remember this. Never forget. And I left the house like the first time in like 3 weeks or something, and I got into an argument over a parking spot with someone, and it felt so good. It's like human interaction. So I was like, usually I would have let him have the spot because it's not worth it, but I was so enjoying the back and forth and the arguing and saying with the guy.
Yeah, it's similar to what they say about new parents when they just have a baby and they're just, I want adult interaction. Just someone to talk to, someone to respond and not just rule on you.
Right, not just like cry, don't understand it, just complain all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So I think that the situation, if anything, it opened up that appetite for more human interaction, for more interacting with people. And like we said, calls are great. Zoom is calls are okay. Zoom is great, but you still want that face to face. You still want that more of a dynamic back and forth. It's not. Again, we had this call. I made sure that I was, my background's nice and clean, and you set up.
Wait, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? I got a mess going on.
You set up the space, but it's not like the real world where you have the real setting and life and interact. Not on a set stage.
Yeah, but I know, I get it. But I think, it's interesting. If you don't know how to find a common ground with someone not in person, and you get on a video for a business call, and you don't know, not a friend, not acquaintance, not family, but and you don't know how to find or make common ground, then maybe you might have to relearn it. But I don't see why it won't be relearned after a few weeks or something. It might be hard at first, and you'll get it in other people. And it's so human nature that I think you'll be back where you were, and you can actually work and practice on it now. Use that as an advantage. So when you come out of this, you can be a better communicator than anyone else.
Right. But also the calls and interactions that we have now, they're all scheduled, and there's just a subject and agenda. Versus real, where you're just walking the sidewalk and you run into someone with no agenda, no topic, and no thing.
Well, I mean, if you're walking by someone, I'm not going to stop them. I don't stop if I'm on the way to somewhere. You're not going
to have a Zoom call with somebody just about there's something random, but you are going to start talking to someone at the coffee machine or at the water cooler about.
Correct, because Zooms need to be scheduled because you both need to get onto the same link at the same time. Well, that's correct. But I mean, people are doing they were doing it earlier in the pandemic, where people would just do happy hours, get together, let's drink. Our family would get together, on Zoom. That was a shit show. Those
are always the best.
Well, it's great, except there's always one crazy person in your family, and every Jew has that crazy aunt or uncle. But, where you put them on mute and pretend you're listening. Anyway. So I mean, we don't really plan or schedule. Like, you're right, because you don't plan or schedule. It's about being authentic. It's about being spontaneous. I don't know exactly the right word is. The spontaneity of it is kind of what makes you as an individual interesting. Also, by the way, my opinion, one of the great formulas, the basic in comedy to get someone to laugh in general, is to say something that they don't expect. You're caught a little off guard, like a wittiness that was unexpected.
Yeah,
Do you
I
know what I
agree.
mean? Or how you tie a couple things together. So I think, in general, even if it might not be funny, but if you say some things that people don't expect, if you behave a little different, your comments are a little different. I mean, my personality isn't normal. I know I don't fit into the mold. Don't try to be like me. But, if you do kind of catch people a little bit off guard or say be different on the call, just be different. Because you got to think about it. Like, you're on calls all day. So is let's say your client. Your client's also on calls all day. So
Right.
why don't you make it easy for them and be more enjoyable? You'll enjoy it too.
Right. I
Like,
agree.
why not?
Yeah. Right. So talk a little bit about the difference between the boundaries, I guess, between personal and business on the conversation. Right. So you're having like a bit work conversation. How personal do you feel it's comfortable? It's okay to get when you're talking to them. Do you talk about your kids? Do you talk about your home life? Do you talk about which car
Always.
you own, and then vice versa?
I don't talk about possessions. I do talk about family, kids. I mean, I'll make marriage jokes because people get it. Like, it's funny, and it's nice to know that, like, oh yeah, everyone has the same exact problems as a parent or as a spouse. If you're not married, you don't get it at all. After like a couple of years, if you marry a kid, you kind of understand it. I mean, all the time, for sure. So like when you mentioned Zara, and I gave you an example how I tied it into my wife and my kids and shopping and pricing, and I made a joke around it, and but yeah, I think the more things you can talk about, the better. And again, it's about finding common ground. So, like, why do people that you don't know, why do they talk about this? Because it's common ground. You can walk up to a stranger and you can both talk about the weather because you're both at that moment experiencing the same weather, and you've probably been experiencing the same weather for the same day or the week because you probably live in the same town, right, or city or wherever you are. So
Right.
it's a common ground. That's a common ground two strangers have. Is one of the beauties of sports is that it brings strangers together. We have a common ground. You know what I mean? That's one of the beauties about it. I don't know who you are. We can be different in every aspect, but we're both here rooting for the same team, right? So there's that common ground. So if you're a parent, if you're married, if you're whatever, if you're a homeowner, you're both in marketing, whatever you're doing, these are all common grounds for you to make conversation, to learn more about the other person. And if you know how to listen, in a sense, actually, you can learn a lot about yourself, which I think a lot of people are missing in the conversation. Is it's not just about listening, but if you hear how someone responds to you, and you can
Right.
actually learn about yourself, and you can improve as an individual or as someone to speak to, as a conversationalist also.
Right. And so part of it, part of this conversation is really kind of keeping it interesting and not just kind of asking, boring questions or generic questions. How do you steer that conversation? How do you, do you have any tips for like, specific questions to ask, or ways to push it into, finding out what you're interested in so I can keep pushing into that direction?
What do you mean? Can you give me an example? I didn't totally
If
follow
I,
you.
if I just like talk about the weather, it's an obvious small talk just to get you talking. But are there any, any specific questions or kind of directions of asking a question where I could find out something that you're really passionate about and get that into that conversation?
Oh yeah, yeah. But first off, you should never ask how's the weather. It's the cheapest way about the conversation. I understand it, especially, you know what I mean, like you get caught in an elevator with someone, you know what I mean, like, you know what I mean. Oh, I was like, you don't want it to be awkward, and I get that. I've been in the elevator, it's awkward, and you're like, what do you say? But we're all sharing some other thing right now. We're all sharing the pandemic. So you can say, how's the pandemic treating you? How's your family dealing with it? Or do you have anyone high risk in your family? These are questions you can ask to literally anybody in the entire world right now.
Right.
And then you can ask, how are you dealing with it personally? Have you picked up any vices? Have you been exercising more? I mean, these are literally a question you can ask to anyone blindfolded in the world, not just someone in your industry and in your eye, you know what I mean, and who's in the Western world or whatever. This is any culture can relate to these things right now. So you should ask about it. You know what I mean? Like, how are you dealing with your kids and screen time? You can talk about parental controls on devices, and you can say, and if you're well read, you can also work in conversations of things that you're learning or reading or studies that, you find out, and you can work them into your conversation, which reflects that you're well read and you're intelligent, whatever. I mean, but that's not the intent. The intent is just to make a better conversation, but it reflects on you very positively. So I would stay away from that. Everything and anything can and should be a connection point.
Right.
And
So
by the way, it doesn't even have to be that. You can do it on looks. You can, like I said, like I could comment on like, Dave looks at, you have good facial hair. When I grow mine out is patchy. And I just started a conversation on it by making a connection between us, even though our facial hair goes different.
yeah.
Right. So you can say that anyone that's a cool shirt. Gray never looks as good as me on let's say white or black. But I'm just saying, I'm making things up here. But like anything that you see, that's a relation point. All you do is relate to something about that other person that you can see. You don't even have to open your mouth, and you could, right? Not just the weather. It could be something they're wearing, or in this case, the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. A tip is stay the hell away from politics, since we're on it, because that would be my my advice with a stranger or someone that you don't know well.
All right. So I guess politics, religion, sometimes usually.
I think faith is good topic. Religion is not.
I agree.
That's kind of like I think faith is totally on. I think like the actual intricacies of religion, it generally should be avoided. There are exceptions, but I think faith is actually. I think it's a fantastic topic. Even if someone finds himself to have no faith, I think it's a great topic just to talk about faith. I find a lot of people find it interesting, and those that don't have a faith actually have a strong opinions and are relatively very thoughtful about it. So I actually think faith is very good.
All right. And so what other, aside from politics and faith, are there any topics you think should be, I mean, obviously once you start to know the person, you can get into these other topics, but anything else you should start to avoid during the first conversation?
No. I mean, in general, no. I think the more you can find a mutual ground and the more you can make someone else laugh and the more that you can laugh and smile is contagious, right? It's like a smiling now. It's awkward. But you're more likely to smile. That's just the way it goes. You just just be yourself, and most importantly, when you have a conversation, make sure you're having fun. That's really what it is. Because if you're having fun, the other person will feel it. They'll loosen up. They'll have fun. They'll share more. Anything you ask them, they'll answer. You'll be more interested. You'll feed off each other, and you'll draw closer together. And you'll like the person more. They'll like you more, and you'll have a better relationship, and you'll enjoy that relationship. It's authentic, and it's great. But you kind of got to put yourself out there to maybe ask or say things that people generally don't. And it's really not that hard. Like 99% of people don't ask private questions on Zoom calls, on phone conversations. They don't. You know what I mean? Right. And it's not hard to separate yourself from the 1% by asking a couple questions about them. But you have to be generally interested.
Right. And I think that's part of the barriers is like you said, 95% of people don't ask. So because they feel it's inappropriate, because nobody asks, they feel like it's inappropriate for them to ask also.
Yeah, but it's so easy to be such a great conversationalist. All I got to do is ask. It's kind of like any topic. Like no one knows anything about anything. If you read one book about a topic, you know more than 99% of the world, of the country, right? So you're technically now an expert if you read one book, because no one's read anything about any topic, whatever it was. This is space exploration, mining in Australia. I don't know. Read a little bit, and suddenly you know more than 99.9% of the population. Now you're not just more interested in all that, but just that's all it takes to separate you from everyone else. So you just asking how someone's doing, making someone laugh, making someone smile, making that connection, unfortunately, separates you from everybody else.
Yeah. And how do you kind of get a conversation? I mean, some people are just very short answers, not because they're upset, not because they're annoyed. It's just their personality. Yeah, they'll answer you with like 1 or 2 word questions, answers. How do you continue the conversation going in that kind of a, thing? There's someone, they're interested. There's somebody that you
call if it's making you feel, even let's say, would you say it's making you feel like a little uncomfortable? It's kind of annoying. In that circumstance, I'm sure you probably have someone in mind when you're asking. No,
I'm just saying, like if there's somebody that you met, an interesting person, nice person, you want to have a conversation with, but they're just like their answer, like their nature is just like, oh, so how's your day going? One kid, my kids, one of them will say, oh, it was great. We went to this and we did this, and then he won't stop talking. The other one will be like, good.
Right. I think that's a kid thing more than an adult thing. But like, I just get sarcastic, but joking, but just gotta play with them. it's like, or you can play the other way. It's like, oh, good. Oh, so you went to the zoo? What does it mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And by the way, we have a responsibility. If someone asks how you're doing, give them a real answer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, generally speaking, like, share something about yourself. They're asking about you. I mean, if someone's answering a short answer like that, in my opinion, it doesn't mean you are, but they think you're bullshitting. Like, you're asking how's the weather. You're just trying to make a common ground, but you don't actually mean it. So they'll entertain you, and then they want to move on to the reason why you're speaking with them. That's what I think. So then you need to work a little bit harder to peel something out of someone. And if that's that rare person that's totally antisocial and hates speaking to people, then okay, so it's their loss, not yours.
Right. All right. Makes sense.
I would avoid speaking to those people altogether if you could. If it's their like, if those people are few and far between, but there's no reason to be having conversations with people that you don't enjoy.
Right, and sometimes it's sometimes you have the option to kind of avoid them. If it's social, sometimes but sometimes you're just kind of in that situation where you're just in that situation. You and a rep from another company are going together to some offsite or something, and you're both stuck in the department.
What would happen if two of those people speak to each other?
I don't think they would.
I'm just curious. Like, what are they like in person, like an hour and a half meeting to go through? They look at fly. Two people who are socially awkward and hate answering and talking about themselves or anyone else. I mean, I'm just like, I don't know. How does that work out? But
well, yeah, it's like, a conversation is based on give and take. You say something, you ask a question, they answer something, ask you a question, kind of the back and forth. When you have one person asking, active, and one person is doing those one word answers, then it's a lot harder. But the person running the conversation basically has to work harder, like you said. But if both people are kind of short answers, not active in the
because it's awkward for them. They don't understand why your question has to come from a connection point.
Right.
Like, if you're just asking them, how are you? Good. That's not a connection point. If you know what I mean? If you made a connection point, like, and by the way, you can make it about you to make it easier for them. And I'll just bring the COVID example, but only because it's universal and anyone can use this with anyone they speak to at all for the rest of the year, is that you can just say, COVID really took really made it hard for me last night because of X, Y, and Z. Have you experienced that? There is no yes or no. Even if they say yes, they'll expound. They'll go into detail, and you can ask them, like, more, go into detail, in general, and they will, and you'll actually learn more about them. And then they've been like, wow, no one went that deep with me, and all you did was that, and suddenly they'll feel more connected. That's, like I said, it doesn't take much to be in the top 1%, and then they'll feel more connected to you than anyone else they've ever spoken to.
Right. So I agree. I think it's getting them to talk and showing them genuine interest is what drives the conversation. Obviously, that's what you need to keep the conversation interesting between the two of you. So we have about 10 minutes left. Is there any other tips that you have that you could bring up, for somebody that is a little awkward and wants to start, getting more out there?
First, if anyone has any questions or comments, leave them now. Anyway, but shout out to Ariel Levine, what's up, man? Say hi. And Forrest, what's up? Here we go. So, and Omri, trying to make sure people shout outs and now ask your comment or questions now. I mean, like, if you're awkward, first off, I gotta test it. So, I mean, know what you're going to say. So you know who you're going into a meeting. You may know a little bit about them. Have in advance, know what you're going to say and practice it. And do that with every single call. And then you have to, when people do when comedians do stand-up comedy, right? They know their shtick perfectly, how they're going to stand, how they're going to move, exactly how many millisecond pauses, the pitch of their voice. But how do they know so perfectly? They try it, and then they get the feedback from the audience, and then they adapt. Okay, I thought that was funny. That joke didn't land. And they'll scratch it, or they'll try to rework it, or that did do, and then they try it again, and then they tweak it. Was that better or worse? Okay, it was worse. Okay, so then we go back to that one, tweak it the other way. Okay, that was better. So, I mean, you need to always be testing your audience. It's just like when I'm testing ads or your target audience and say which banner is going to have higher click-through rates. I mean, you just got to test it. You kind of got to be a marketer about it, right? You got to have you have to feel the pulse, and also you have to be curious. But it means, so just say something, see how it's received. Say it 2 or 3 times. See how it's received. See how it's learned. Be like, okay, how can I make this receive better? How can I get this to be received better? Make changes for the next 3 for the next 3 conversations you have as an opener. And you'll get better and better. And then you'll just, as you get better, and what will happen is the other person will start to feed you back. And then you'll get better and you'll just practice from there. And you'll find out I'm actually having an enjoyable conversation while discussing much needed work. And I actually now looking forward to my next call with this individual, and he or she is looking forward to this call with me, and they didn't until then.
Right. Okay. I'm just going to do the comments here to see if there's anything I missed, but it doesn't look like it.
I'm not looking at. We're on Facebook too, right?
Yeah, we're on Facebook and we're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I have nothing to share. What do you think, man? What do you do to break the ice?
So
I can make a connection with someone.
It's definitely something that I struggle with. For me, it's if there is an obvious connection, then I go for it, obviously. But for me, it's a lot harder to find those, like you said, coming up to someone and starting to talk about a nice shirt. I like your shirt, or I like your shoes, or something like that is a lot harder for me to start the conversation with. I usually do try to find some kind of a common ground with someone. And in a business setting, it's a lot easier. In a personal setting, it's a lot harder to do that, especially if you're not planning that meeting. It's a chance meeting. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many icebreakers that it comes down to if it's somebody local, then it's probably going to have start off with the kids in their school. If it's somebody if it's in the bakery, then it might be something about the location we're in. But yeah, it's not something that's easy for me.
Yeah, there's 2 things I want to add. You don't just ask. You don't ever say nice whatever, nice shoes. You just say nice shoes because what? They remind you why are they nice? Why are they cool? What is it about it in general? That's a real compliment because they put thought into everything they wear. I mean, that's nice doesn't mean anything. You can close your eyes and say that about anything, and then been like, why does he think it's nice? But if you said why, I'm just saying if you have an unhappy person, but if you say why, they're not thinking, what's he trying to get out of me? Oh, he actually thinks it's nice because of this, because he said that. So we say why, I mean, is I think when you do that. Another thing I find is for example, anything interesting happened to you today, David? Or anything interesting you've seen? Or anything that made you think about anything today that happened at all today? Anything? I know I'm throwing you putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to not, I'm trying to really think through my day.
Or yesterday, in the last week, is anything interesting or anything you've seen or made you think differently, or ever get any cognitive dissonance or anything, or something that was funny, or that happened to you, or something bad that happened?
A what?
Or something bad that happened to you?
No, actually, I had a pretty interesting conversation yesterday with someone.
Okay, you don't have to say with who, but what was interesting about it?
So what was interesting about it and kind of got me to look at things differently a little bit is that it was a VC. He just funded a VC. A high school friend moved to the Valley, funded a VC, and he's opening up a content channel around VC and investing. But he chose to do this channel, to open up this channel on Instagram, not the traditional, not LinkedIn where you're expecting it, not Facebook where you have the audience, but Instagram specifically. And kind of when I asked him about it, he said that it was because of the modern VC. That's where they hang out. Now today that we're all on Facebook, our kids don't want to be on Facebook, and so that in between generation, the 24-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, they're not on Facebook as much. Instagram is their go-to, and so that's where his audience is, which kind of made me rethink the whole the B2B channels versus the B2C channels that we kind of look at.
Yeah. So I would bring that up in conversation. You can start a conversation. So I can get on oh, hey, Dave. Hey, how you doing today? Great. I've been I just had a great conversation earlier. This guy's a VC, and he's starting to do social and engagement about VCs, but he's actually doing it on Instagram, not LinkedIn. It's kind of interesting. What do you think about that? Am I out of touch generationally? Is there something there that I'm not there, or is he just chasing a lot of people that that chase vanity on Instagram that they don't on LinkedIn, and maybe that's why it's relevant? But it got you to think. So bring that, your curiosity, it's contagious. Bring it to the call. Bring it to your next conversation, and that can literally be how you open your call for all of your calls that day. So anything that's interesting or weird that happened, or unique, or anything that made you think, that's my favorite, right? And then if it made you think, And then if you frame it, how it made you think, it will make anyone else think, right? Or something that made you curious. So I mean, that's another way that you can actually that you can go into calls is that anything that you experience actually. So right, Gary Vaynerchuk says people are always trying to make content. They're doing it wrong. You need to document.
Yeah.
So just document your day. If something interesting happened, just document it, I mean, orally in a conversation. You know what I mean? So like instead of it doesn't have to be huge things. You know what I mean? Like I got a new car or something that might happen every several years. You know what I mean? But any small conversation, just document these things and and share them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it says great idea for bringing an interesting thought from your day. Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something that it makes sense. It's something that you have you have access to. It's something that's always fresh and always new and always different. So it's not the same thought that you're bringing up. I agree. I like it.
All right, cool. I hope that helps. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any. I see Ariel Levine said
from you.
No, from me now. I see Ariel Levine had said interesting, but he's not kind of saying what do you think is interesting? Which part of it?
Right, exactly. Well, what do you think is the most? We'll finish up in a minute, but because it's interesting. You asked about people who are scared to like cross the line. Has anyone ever said anything to you that crossed the line? I know women are usually on the receiving end of things that cross the line. Or have you ever experienced someone, let's say, probably not necessarily intended to, or you know what I mean, not without ill will, cross the line? Whether you were to someone else.
I don't think that, I mean, nothing offhand comes to mind. This is what I was saying before, that in 15 minutes I'll probably be like, oh yeah, I should have said, this came to this is something I thought of later.
This is like the Seinfeld episodes, the George Costanza and the comeback was it. Yeah, because like I was waiting. Whatever. You know the episode. If not, then sucks for you.
Yeah. So nothing offhand comes to mind, but it is something that is on my mind when I'm having a conversation. I'm like, if I ask him about this, is it too much? Is it not too much? Is it pushing the thing? Will it make him uncomfortable? Will it make me uncomfortable? That's kind of it is something that kind of crosses my mind when I'm having a conversation, trying to avoid.
Awesome, great, sweet. I got nothing else to share. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us.
And if you have any questions, we're going to be watching the comments on this video. So if you have any questions that come up later, or you watch this later on, feel free to ask the questions, and we'll answer you. Like always, it's been a pleasure chatting.
Awesome. If anyone has any questions, they can hit me up on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Bye.